Captain Sarah Chen stared at the empty space where New Geneva should have been. Her hands gripped the command chair on the bridge of the scout ship Hermes. The silence felt wrong. Very wrong. "Are we in the right place?" she asked her navigator. "Yes, Captain. These are the exact coordinates for New Geneva Colony." 3 days ago, the colony had stopped answering calls from Earth. New Geneva was home to 2.5 million people. It was humanity's biggest success story outside of Earth itself. The planet had green fields, clean cities, and schools full of happy children. Now there was nothing but rocks floating in space. Lieutenant Marcus Webb walked up to Chen's chair. His face was pale. "Captain, we're picking up debris, lots of it." Chen felt her stomach drop. "What kind of debris?" "Metal fragments. Some looked like they came from buildings, others from ships." Webb paused. "And there are organic traces." The word organic hit Chen like a punch. Organic meant people. It meant the colonists who had called New Geneva home. "Take us closer," Chen ordered. "But keep the shields up." The Hermes moved slowly through the debris field. What they found made Chen's crew sick. Pieces of homes floated past their windows. A child's toy spaceship drifted by, half melted. The remains of a school bus hung in the darkness like a broken promise. "Captain," called out the communications officer, "I'm getting something, a signal from an emergency beacon. Put it on speakers." The bridge filled with static, then a voice. It was scratchy and full of fear. "This is Mayor Johnson of New Geneva. We are under attack. Ships are coming down from orbit. They're not responding to our calls. They're just shooting. Everything. The downtown is gone. The hospital is gone. They're killing everyone. Dear God, they're killing the children." The recording cut to static. Then another voice came through. "This is Colonel Martinez at the defense station. The attack fleet is massive. I count at least 50 capital ships. They have technology we've never seen. Our weapons can't even scratch their shields. They're not taking prisoners. They're not asking for surrender. They're just wiping us out." More static. Then a final message. "This is Dr. Susan Park at the Research Center. I'm uploading all our data to this beacon before they find us. The attackers are from the Hegemony Coalition. 6 alien species working together. They sent a message saying humans spread too fast and take too much space. They said we're a threat that must be removed. They said this is a lesson for all humanity. They said—" The message ended in the sound of explosions and screaming. Chen closed her eyes. When she opened them, she saw tears on the faces of her crew. "Sir," Webb said quietly. "What do we do?" Chen looked at the floating remains of what had been a thriving human world. She thought about the families who had lived here, the children who had played in the parks, the farmers who had grown, food to feed other colonies, all gone. "We collect evidence," she said, "every piece, every recording, every fragment, and then we take it home." The next 6 hours were the hardest of Chen's life. Her crew worked in shifts because no one could handle looking at the debris for too long. They found pieces of the colony's main library. Burned pages from children's books floated in the vacuum. They found parts of the medical center, still with patient records intact. They found the remains of the colony ship that had brought the first settlers 20 years ago. It had been turned into a monument in the town square. Now it was just twisted metal. The worst discovery came from Ensign Lisa Park, Dr. Susan Park's daughter who had joined the crew to look for her mother. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice breaking, "I found something." On the main screen appeared a piece of plastic, half melted but still recognizable. It was a child's drawing, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. At the bottom, in crayon, were the words, "My family," and a name, Tommy Wilson, age 6. Lisa Park started crying. Soon half the bridge crew was crying with her. Chen knew they had found enough. More than enough. "Set course for Earth," she ordered. "Maximum speed." The trip back to Earth took 2 weeks. During that time, Chen's crew organized all the evidence they had collected. Video recordings from security cameras showed the attack in horrible detail. The alien ships had appeared without warning. They had ignored all attempts at communication. They had simply started destroying everything human on the planet. The attackers had been thorough. They had bombed every city, every farm, every road. They had destroyed the spaceport so no one could escape. They had even bombed the cemeteries, as if they wanted to erase every trace that humans had ever been there. When the Hermes reached Earth, Chen sent her report ahead. By the time they docked at Luna Station, every major news network was asking for interviews. Chen refused them all. She went straight to Earth, straight to the Colonial Defense Headquarters. She walked into a room full of generals and politicians. Without saying a word, she placed a small piece of plastic on the conference table. It was Tommy Wilson's drawing. 2.5 million people, she said. Gone, just because some aliens think we're growing too fast. General Morrison, the head of Colonial Defense, picked up the drawing. Tell us everything, Captain. Chen did. She told them about the debris fields, about the recordings, about the Hegemony Coalition's message claiming responsibility, about the children's toys floating in space where playgrounds used to be. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Finally, President Santos spoke. Captain Chen, you and your crew have done humanity a great service. Now we know what we're dealing with. What are we going to do? Chen asked. Santos stood up and looked out the window at Earth below. We're going to make sure this never happens again. How? Santos turned back to the room. Her eyes were hard as steel. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when you murder human children. Chen left the meeting feeling strange. She had expected anger. She had expected demands for immediate revenge. Instead, she got quiet determination that somehow felt much more frightening. That night, she watched the news reports. Tommy Wilson's drawing was on every screen on Earth. His parents were dead, but somehow his simple crayon picture had become the symbol of human loss. The news anchors spoke about New Geneva's libraries and schools and hospitals. They showed pictures of families who would never come home. But Chen noticed something else in the reports. Shipyards that had been building colony vessels were suddenly hiring more workers. Mining operations in the asteroid belt were expanding. Universities were offering new courses in military engineering. Earth was not just mourning, Earth was preparing. Chen thought about the Hegemony Coalition's message. They had called the destruction of New Geneva a lesson for humanity. They wanted to teach humans to stay in their small corner of space and not spread out among the stars. Looking at Tommy Wilson's drawing one more time, Chen realized the aliens had taught humanity a lesson, just not the one they intended. They had taught humanity what it looked like when someone tried to wipe them out, and humanity was a very good student. President Maria Santos stood at the podium in the United Earth Assembly. Behind her, Tommy Wilson's drawing filled a massive screen. The 6-year-old's stick figures seemed to watch over the representatives from every human world. Santos had been president for 3 years. She had always believed in peaceful solutions. She had spent her time building schools and hospitals on the colony worlds. Now she faced the biggest decision in human history. Members of the Assembly, she began. 3 weeks ago, the Hegemony Coalition murdered 2.5 million of our people. They did this without warning. They did this without mercy. They did this to teach us a lesson. The assembly hall was silent. Every representative knew what had happened at New Geneva. They had all seen the videos. They had all heard the recordings of people dying. The coalition has sent us a message, Santos continued. They say humans expand too quickly. They say we take up too much space in the galaxy. They say New Geneva was a warning to make us stop. Santos paused and looked around the room. She saw anger on many faces. She saw tears on others. She saw determination on all of them. Today we send them our answer. We will remember them all. That was it. Santos stepped down from the podium and left the hall. No declaration of war. No angry speeches. No threats of revenge. Just 5 simple words. We will remember them all. The Hegemony Coalition had expected something different. Their intelligence networks had monitored human communications for weeks. They expected demands for reparations. They expected angry messages. They expected humans to do what most species did after an attack: negotiate. Instead, Earth went quiet. Admiral Marcus Webb sat in his office deep under the Colorado mountains. The hidden facility had been built 50 years ago just in case humanity ever faced an enemy too strong for normal military forces. Today, Webb activated Protocol 7 for the first time. Protocol 7 was simple in concept, but massive in scale. Every human world would contribute to building the largest military force in galactic history. Every shipyard would be converted. Every factory would be retooled. Every resource would be focused on one goal: making sure New Geneva never happened again. Webb's first call went to Director Elizabeth Voss at the Titan yards near Saturn. Titan was humanity's biggest shipbuilding facility. For 20 years, it had built colony ships to carry families to new worlds. "Elizabeth," Webb said, "we need to talk." An hour later, Voss was looking at classified plans she had never seen before. Hidden in the Titan facility were blueprints for warships. Not just any warships, but dreadnoughts larger than anything humans had ever built. "How long have these plans existed?" she asked. "Since we first met another species," Webb replied. "We hoped we'd never need them." Voss studied the designs. Each dreadnought was 3 kilometers long. Each one carried enough firepower to level a continent. Each one was designed to be built quickly using automated systems. "How many do you want?" she asked. Webb looked at the data from New Geneva. He thought about the 50 ships that had destroyed a world full of children. He thought about the 6 species in the Hegemony Coalition. He thought about making sure they could never do this again. "All of them," he said. "Build them all." "Sir, these plans show designs for 500,000 ships." "I know." Voss stared at him. 500,000 dreadnoughts? That's impossible." The Coalition thought genocide was impossible too. They were wrong. Within days, the transformation began. The Titan. Yards expanded overnight. New construction bays appeared faster than seemed possible. Automated factories that had been building civilian equipment switched to making weapons and armor. Dr. Jennifer Kim had been designing better farms for the colony worlds. Now she found herself in a secret laboratory under the moon, working on something called quantum foundries. These machines could take raw materials and turn them into finished spaceships in a matter of days. "I don't understand," Kim said to her new supervisor. "Yesterday, I was growing better corn. Today you want me to build war machines?" "The people who ate your corn are dead," the supervisor replied. "Now we make sure their killers can never hurt anyone else." Kim looked at the quantum foundry designs. The technology was incredible. It used controlled fusion to break down asteroid metal and rebuild it into ship hulls. It could make a dreadnought's armor plating in 6 hours. "This will work," she said, quietly. This will actually work. All across the solar system, similar conversations were happening. Mining operations in the asteroid belt tripled their output overnight. Every piece of rock was needed for the new ships. Mars began producing atmospheric systems. Europa provided water ice for reaction mass. Even the small research stations were contributing something. Captain Sarah Chen found herself in charge of training new crews. Every day, thousands of civilians volunteered for the fleet. Teachers became tactical officers. Engineers became weapons specialists. Farmers learned to operate fusion reactors. "I used to run a bakery," said Maria Gonzalez, now a gunner on the dreadnought New Geneva's Wrath. "I made wedding cakes. Now I'm learning to fire plasma cannons." "Why?" Chen asked. Gonzalez showed her a picture on her tablet. It was from her bakery's website, a birthday cake shaped like a spaceship, made for a little boy's party. This was for Tommy Wilson's 6th birthday. I was supposed to make his 7th birthday cake, too. Chen understood. All across the fleet, people had similar stories. The war had become personal for every human alive. The Hegemony Coalition's intelligence services noticed the increased activity in human space. Their reports estimated that Earth might build 50 new warships within a year, maybe 100 if they really pushed their industrial capacity. The humans are responding as expected, reported Intelligence Director Keth Val to the Coalition Council. They are angry and building some ships, but their industrial base is limited. They cannot threaten our superiority. The Coalition Council was satisfied. They had crushed human expansion and proven their dominance. Soon, Earth would accept their place in the galactic order. They had no idea what was really happening in human space. Dr. Elizabeth Voss stood on an observation deck overlooking the Titan yards. 6 months ago, this had been a facility building, colony ships. Now it stretched beyond the horizon, filled with construction bays building instruments of war. She counted the ships under construction. In this facility alone, there were 10,000 dreadnoughts taking shape. And Titan was just one of dozens of similar yards throughout human space. "How many are we up to?" asked Admiral Webb, joining her at the observation window. 480,000 completed, 20,000 more finishing this week. Webb nodded. Good. The Coalition thinks we might have 50 ships by now. Voss watched robotic systems install weapons on a newly finished Dreadnought. Each ship was being named after someone who died at New Geneva. The big command ships had names like Maria Santos and Dr. Susan Park. The smaller ones had names like Tommy Wilson and Jenny Martinez, age 4. "Do you think this will work?" Voss asked. Webb thought about the children's drawings found floating in space. He thought about families who would never be reunited. He thought about the species that had decided humans needed to be taught a lesson. "It's going to work," he said, "because it has to." Far away on the Coalition homeworlds, life continued as normal. They had taught the upstart humans their place in the galaxy. Now they could return to more important matters. They never noticed. The gravitational anomalies starting to appear at the edge of human space. They dismissed the energy readings as cosmic background radiation. They ignored their deep space sensors that kept malfunctioning whenever they pointed toward Earth. Humanity had learned their lesson, all right. They had learned that the galaxy was a dangerous place filled with species willing to commit genocide. They had learned that peaceful expansion was not enough to protect their children. Most importantly, they had learned that sometimes the only way to prevent future wars was to become so overwhelmingly powerful that no one would ever dare attack. You again? The lesson was almost complete. Soon it would be time for the final exam. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Retribution and looked out at the impossible sight before him. 500,000 dreadnoughts hung in perfect formation, stretching as far as his eyes could see. The fleet was so large that ships on the far edge appeared as tiny dots of light. 6 months. That's how long it had taken humanity to build the largest military force in galactic history. 6 months since New Geneva had been turned to floating debris and children's toys. Fleet status report, Webb ordered. Captain Lisa Park, now his chief of staff, consulted her tablet. 500,000 dreadnoughts ready for combat, all ships fully crewed and supplied, all weapon systems operational. All crews have completed training. Webb nodded. The numbers still seemed impossible, even to him. 500,000 ships, each one 3 kilometers long and packed with enough firepower to level a continent. The combined mass of the fleet was larger than most moons. "How did we do it?" asked Captain Yuki Tanaka, commander of the New Geneva's Wrath. "Quantum foundries," replied Dr. Elizabeth Voss, who had joined them on the bridge. "We built machines that could build machines. Then those machines built ships faster than anyone thought possible." Webb walked to the tactical display. It showed the entire fleet in formation. Each ship was marked with a name from New Geneva. The largest dreadnoughts carried the names of community leaders and heroes. The smaller ones bore the names of children and families. Tommy Wilson, Webb read from one of the ship names, age 6, liked to draw pictures of his family. Maria. Santos, read another officer. Not the president. A teacher at New Geneva Elementary School. Dr. James Park, read Captain Park, her voice quiet. My father. He ran the medical center. Every ship in the fleet had a story like that. Every name represented someone who had died when the Hegemony Coalition decided to teach humanity a lesson. The crews took their ship names seriously. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a memorial that could fight back. Admiral, called the communications officer. We're getting a message from Earth. President Santos wants to speak with you. Santos appeared on the main screen. Behind her, Webb could see Earth hanging in space like a blue marble. It looked so peaceful and small compared to the massive fleet surrounding them. Admiral Webb, Santos said. Is the fleet ready? Yes, Madam President. 500,000 ships, 25 million crew members, all volunteers. Santos was quiet for a moment. 25 million people volunteered to crew these ships. More than that asked to join. We had to turn people away. Every human in the solar system wanted to be part of this. Webb understood why. The attack on New Geneva had hurt every human alive. Parents looked at their own children and imagined them crying for help as bombs fell from the sky. Teachers thought about lesson plans that would never be taught. Doctors remembered patients they would never be able to save. The coalition still doesn't know we're coming, Santos said. Their intelligence networks think we have maybe 100 ships. How is that possible? Asked Captain Tanaka. We've been very careful, Webb replied. All construction happened in hidden facilities. All communications were encrypted. All fleet movements were disguised as civilian traffic. Dr. Voss pulled up a holographic display. The quantum foundries were built inside asteroids. From the outside, they looked like normal mining operations. The ships were assembled in pieces and put together in deep space. Webb thought about the incredible effort it had taken. Millions of humans working around the clock for 6 months. Factory workers who hadn't seen their families in weeks, engineers who solved impossible problems through sheer determination, ordinary people who had become extraordinary because someone had murdered their neighbors. What about the crews? Santos asked. Captain Park answered. Every major profession is represented. We have teachers running communication systems, farmers operating life support, artists designing tactical displays. Everyone wanted to contribute. And they're all ready for combat? More than ready, Webb said. They're motivated in a way I've never seen before. Every crew member has seen the videos from New Geneva. Every crew member knows what we're fighting for. Webb pulled up personnel files on his tablet. Maria Gonzalez used to run a bakery. Now she's the best gunner in the fleet. She practices 12 hours a day because she was supposed to make Tommy Wilson's 7th birthday cake. Dr. Jennifer Kim was an agricultural scientist. Now she runs the reactor systems on the Dr. Susan Park. She says she's growing energy instead of corn. Captain Sarah Chen was a scout ship commander. Now she leads an entire battle group. She's named every ship in her command after families from New Geneva. Santos listened to each story. Webb could see tears in her eyes, but also something else. Pride. Determination. The same quiet fury that had driven humanity to build this fleet. Admiral, Santos said, the coalition sent us a message after New Geneva. They said they were teaching us a lesson about expanding too quickly. They said we needed to learn our place in the galaxy. Yes, ma'am. I have a message for you to deliver to them. Tell them we learned our lesson. Tell them we learned it very well. The transmission ended, leaving Webb alone with his fleet and his thoughts. He walked to another display that showed the technical specifications of their dreadnoughts. Each ship represented the best of human technology, adapted for war. The main guns were plasma cannons based on fusion reactor designs. The same technology that had powered peaceful colonies now delivered destruction at the speed of light. The point defense systems were upgraded mining lasers that had once cut asteroids into useful shapes. Now they cut attacking missiles into harmless debris. The shields used gravitational manipulation technology originally designed for terraforming. The same systems that had shaped New Geneva's continents now protected human ships from enemy fire. The artificial intelligence systems had been designed to manage colonial ecosystems. Now they calculated firing solutions and battle tactics. "We turned our tools of creation into weapons of war," said Dr. Voss, reading his thoughts. "The Coalition forced us to," Webb replied. "They could have left us alone. They could have talked to us. Instead, they chose genocide." Webb thought about the moral implications of what they were about to do. 500,000 dreadnoughts was enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. They could wipe out the Coalition homeworlds just as easily as the Coalition had wiped out New Geneva, but that wasn't the plan. Humanity had learned something the Coalition hadn't expected. They had learned that becoming monsters to fight monsters was not the answer. They had learned that overwhelming force could be used to prevent war, not just to win it. "Fleet commanders, report to the bridge," Webb announced. Within minutes, the bridge was filled with captains and admirals. Some were former military officers. Others were civilians who had learned command skills in the past 6 months. All of them were united by the same purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began, "in 6 hours we jump to the HFY system. That's the Coalition's main fortress world. They have a fleet of about 2,000 ships there." He paused and looked around the room. "We are going to arrive with 500,000 ships. They will be outnumbered 250 to 1. "Will they surrender?" asked Captain Chen. "Maybe, maybe not. But either way, we're going to make sure the galaxy understands something very important. Humanity builds more than just colonies and farms. When someone hurts our children, we build fleets that can darken the stars." Webb activated the tactical display one more time. It showed their destination, Kethvar, the seat of Coalition power. The system had been chosen because it represented everything the Coalition stood for: military strength, established order, the belief that older species had the right to control younger ones. "Remember," Webb told his commanders, "we're not going there to become like them. We're going there to make sure no one ever becomes like them again." The fleet began final preparations for the jump to hyperspace. 500,000 ships moving, with perfect coordination. 25 million humans united by grief and determination. The largest military force ever assembled, built by a species that had preferred to grow corn and teach children to read. As the jump countdown began, Webb thought about Tommy Wilson's drawing one more time, a little boy's picture of his family, holding hands under a sunny sky. It had become the symbol of everything humanity was fighting for. Soon, the galaxy would learn what happened when someone tried to erase pictures like that. Soon, the Coalition would understand that humanity had indeed learned their lesson. The lesson was simple: never again. Admiral Zeth Kara of the Coalition Navy was drinking his morning tea when his tactical officer burst into his quarters without permission. In 40 years of military service, Zeth Kara had never seen such breach of protocol. "Admiral," the officer gasped, "you need to see this, right now." Zeth Kara followed him to the command center of Fortress Kethvar, the Coalition's most powerful military installation. The massive space station orbited the Coalition's capital world and commanded a fleet of 2,000 ships. It was considered invincible. "Report," Zeth Kara ordered as he reached the tactical displays. "Sir, we have contacts emerging from hyperspace, at the edge of the system. Many contacts." Zeth Kara looked at the sensor readings and frowned. "How many is many?" "Computer is still counting, sir. Current estimate is 498,000 individual vessels." Zeth Kara stared at the number. "That's impossible. Check your sensors." "Already done, sir. 3 times. The readings are accurate." "Show me." The main display lit up with a view of space, near the system's edge. What Zethkara saw made his blood freeze. Ships appeared out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands upon thousands. The emergence points created a wall of light that stretched across. The darkness. Computer, classify vessel types. All contacts read as capital ship mass, the computer announced in its calm voice. Classification, Dreadnought class or larger. Total count, 500,000 vessels. Zethkara sat down heavily in his command chair. In his 40 years of service, he had seen many fleets. The largest coalition fleet ever assembled had contained 3,000 ships. This was 50 times larger. Who are they? He asked quietly. Before anyone could answer, the communications array lit up with an incoming transmission. The face that appeared on screen was human. Admiral Marcus Webb of Earth looked directly at Zethkara, with eyes like cold steel. Admiral. Zethkara, Webb said. I am Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Fleet. You probably don't remember New Geneva Colony. 6 months ago, your forces murdered 2.5 million humans there, including children. Zethkara did remember. New Geneva had been a simple operation. 1 fleet, 50 ships, a quick demonstration of coalition power. It was supposed to teach humanity to stay in their corner of space. You wish to demonstrate the consequences of humanity's expansion, Webb continued. We are here to demonstrate the consequences of humanity's grief. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkara staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff looked terrified. They all understood the numbers. 500,000 human ships against 2,000 coalition vessels. Send a message to Coalition Command, Zethkara ordered. Tell them we need immediate reinforcement. Sir, his communications officer replied, Coalition Command is asking if our sensors are malfunctioning. They don't believe the numbers. Zethkara almost laughed. He didn't believe the numbers either. But there they were on every display. 500,000 enemy ships moving toward them with terrible purpose. Open a channel to the human fleet, he ordered. Webb's face reappeared on screen. Behind him, Zethkara could see other humans working at control stations. They looked calm, professional. Ready. Admiral Webb, Zethkara began. Perhaps we can discuss this situation. The Coalition is prepared to offer reparations for the New Geneva incident. Incident? Webb's voice was soft, but there was something dangerous in it. You call the murder of 2.5 million people an incident? It was a military action designed to prevent future conflict. Webb was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his words were measured and careful. Admiral, let me explain something to you. 6 months ago, humanity learned that the galaxy contains species willing to commit genocide to solve political problems. Today, we are here to solve that problem. By committing genocide yourselves? No. By making sure it never happens again. Zethkara watched his tactical displays as the human fleet continued its approach. 500,000 ships moving in perfect formation. The organization required for such a fleet was staggering. The industrial capacity needed to build it was beyond imagination. How? He asked. How did you build so many ships so quickly? We learned from you, Webb replied. You taught us that the galaxy is not a safe place for peaceful species. You taught us that sometimes terrible things happen to good people. You taught us that we needed to be stronger. This is madness. No species can maintain a fleet this size. You're right, Webb said. We can't maintain it. That's why we're going to use it to create a galaxy where we don't need it. The human fleet reached weapons range. Zethkara's sensors showed energy. Readings that made no sense. Each human ship was outputting power levels equal to a coalition battleship. Their smallest vessels were as strong as his heavy cruisers. All ships, Zethkara broadcast to his fleet. Prepare for combat. Admiral, Webb said from the screen. Look at your odds. 2,000 ships against 500,000. You can't win this fight. We are Coalition Navy. We do not surrender. Webb nodded. I understand. Duty above all else. I respect that. But consider this. How many of your crews have families? How many have children? Zethkara thought about his own family. His daughter was studying music at the Capital University. His son was learning to pilot civilian transport ships. They didn't deserve to die because of military decisions. What are you proposing? He asked. Surrender your fleet. All ships, all personnel. You will be treated according to military law. No one will be harmed. Your crews will be allowed to contact their families. And if we fight? Webb's expression didn't change. Then we will destroy your fleet, all of it, because we cannot allow the species that murdered children to maintain the power to do it again. Zethkara looked around his command center. His officers were watching the tactical displays with growing fear. The human fleet had spread out across the system. Every coalition ship was surrounded by hundreds of human vessels. How do we know you won't kill us anyway? Because, Webb said, we are not you. We don't murder civilians. We don't target children. We don't commit genocide to solve political problems. We are here to stop those things from happening. Zethkara made the hardest decision of his military career. All coalition ships. This is Admiral Zethkara. Stand down, weapons. Prepare to surrender. Sir, his tactical officer asked. Are you sure? Zethkara looked at the display showing 500,000 human ships. Each one represented humanity's response to the murder of their children. Each one was a promise that such murders would not be tolerated. Yes, he said. I'm sure. The surrender took 3 hours. Coalition ships powered down their weapons and shields one by one. Human vessels moved in to escort them to secure positions. Throughout the process, the humans were professional and respectful. They provided medical aid to injured coalition personnel. They allowed communication with families. They treated prisoners according to military law. Admiral Webb came aboard Fortress Kethvar in person. He walked through the corridors with a small escort, looking at the coalition's most powerful installation. When he reached the command center, he studied the tactical displays that had tracked the battle. Impressive facility, he told Zethkara. Very advanced technology. Not advanced enough, apparently. Webb looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. Admiral, you fought an honorable campaign. You followed orders. You protected your people. I respect that. Then why destroy our fleet? We're not destroying it. We're incorporating it into a new galactic defense force, one designed to prevent future genocides. Zethkara stared at him. You're going to use our ships? With willing crews, yes. The galaxy needs protection from species that think genocide is an acceptable political tool. Who better to provide that protection than those who have seen what happens when we fail? As Webb spoke, reports came in from across the galaxy. The Coalition's other fleets were surrendering without a fight. The news of Kethvar's defeat had spread quickly. No one wanted to face 500,000 human dreadnoughts. What happens now? Zethkara asked. Webb walked to the main display and looked out at the human fleet. 500,000 ships representing humanity's transformation from peaceful farmers to galactic peacekeepers. Now, he said, we build a better galaxy, one where children can draw pictures of their families without worrying that someone will decide they don't deserve to exist. Zethkara thought about his own grandchildren, about Tommy Wilson's drawing floating in space, about the choices that had led to this moment. Will it work? He asked. Webb looked at the massive fleet surrounding them. 500,000 ships, crewed by teachers and farmers and bakers who had become warriors to protect their children. It has to, he said, because the alternative is unacceptable. 3 days after the Battle of Kethvar, President Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the New Geneva Memorial, looking out at the defeated coalition fleet. 2,000 ships hung in space, their crews waiting to learn their fate. Around them, humanity's 500,000 dreadnoughts maintained perfect formation. The galaxy had watched in stunned silence as news of the surrender spread. Species that had considered the coalition invincible now saw their fleets captured by humans who had appeared from nowhere with impossible numbers. "Madam President," Admiral Webb said, joining her at the observation window, "the Coalition Council has agreed to meet. They're sending representatives to discuss terms." Santos nodded. She had been preparing for this moment since the day Geneva died. The choices made here would determine whether the galaxy learned from its mistakes or repeated them. "Have they agreed to our conditions?" "All of them. Complete surrender of all military forces, reparations for New Geneva, and most importantly, acceptance of the new galactic peacekeeping charter." Santos thought about that charter. It was a simple document, really. No species would be allowed to commit genocide. No government could order the destruction of civilian populations. Any military force that targeted children would face the full might of humanity's fleet. They agreed to that? They don't have much choice. Half the galaxy saw what happened at Kethvar. Nobody wants to face our fleet in battle. The coalition representatives arrived in a small diplomatic vessel. Santos met them in the conference room of the New Geneva Memorial. The room's walls were covered with pictures from the destroyed colony, families smiling at the camera, children playing in parks, teachers with their students, all dead now, but not forgotten. The coalition delegation was led by Elder Vashitar, the senior member of their ruling council. He was an old being, representing a species that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years. Today, he looked small and defeated. "President Santos," he began, "the Coalition Council recognizes the impressive nature of your military response. We are prepared to discuss reasonable terms for peace." Santos gestured to the pictures on the walls. "Do you see these people, Elder Vashitar?" Yes. They were teachers and farmers and doctors. They were children learning to read. They were families who moved to New Geneva to build better lives. "Your forces murdered them all." Vashitar shifted uncomfortably. "The action at New Geneva was regrettable, but it was necessary to maintain galactic stability." "Stability?" Santos kept her voice calm, but Admiral Webb could see the fury in her eyes. "You call genocide stability?" Humanity was expanding too, rapidly. You were taking resources that belonged to older, more established species. Santos pulled up a holographic display showing New Geneva before the attack. Green fields stretched to the horizon, cities full of parks and schools, spaceports, where children watched ships coming and going. What resources? New Geneva was a farming world. They grew food and built schools. They weren't threatening anyone. Your expansion pattern indicated future conflicts. So you decided to murder children to prevent theoretical future problems. The room fell silent. Elder Vashitar looked at the pictures on the walls, seeing for the first time the faces of the people his government had ordered killed. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. Santos activated another display. This one showed the peace terms humanity had prepared. They were surprisingly reasonable for a species that had just demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. First, complete demilitarization of all coalition forces. Your ships will be incorporated into a new galactic peacekeeping fleet under human command. "Impossible. We cannot surrender our sovereignty." "You already did," Admiral Webb said. 3 days ago when you surrendered your fleets without a fight. "Second," Santos continued, "reparations for New Geneva. You will provide the resources and labor to rebuild the colony. Every building, every farm, every school. And third," Santos looked directly at Vashitar, "you will accept the establishment of a new galactic government, one designed to prevent future genocides, one that protects the rights of all species, not just the old and powerful." Elder Vashitar studied the terms carefully. They were harsh but not vindictive. Humanity could have demanded the destruction of the coalition homeworlds. Instead, they were offering a chance at redemption. "And if we refuse?" Santos gestured toward the observation window, where the human fleet stretched beyond the horizon. Then you will discover what happens when a species that builds 500,000 dreadnoughts in 6 months decides that negotiation is no longer an option. The negotiations continued for 2 days. The coalition tried to bargain for better terms, but they had no leverage. Every species in the galaxy had seen the footage from Kethvar. 500,000 human ships appearing out of nowhere, accepting the surrender of the coalition's most powerful fleet without losing a single vessel. In the end, the coalition signed everything. Complete surrender, reparations for New Geneva, acceptance of human military dominance. Most importantly, they agreed to the new galactic charter that made genocide a crime punishable by the full force of humanity's fleet. Admiral Webb found President Santos in her quarters after the signing ceremony. She was looking at a tablet showing reports from across human space. The massive war fleet was already beginning to transform into a peacekeeping force. "How are our people handling the transition?" he asked. "Better than expected. Most of the crews want to stay. They understand that someone needs to keep the peace." Webb looked at the reports. Former teachers were learning to be ship captains. Ex-farmers were becoming fleet administrators. Bakers and mechanics and artists were turning into the guardians of galactic civilization. "Maria Gonzalez sent a message," Santos said. "She's staying on as gunner for the New Geneva's Wrath. She says Tommy Wilson deserves a ship that will protect other children." "What about the others?" "Dr. Jennifer Kim is designing better life support systems for the peacekeeping stations. Captain Sarah Chin is setting up training programs for coalition personnel who want to join the fleet. They're all finding ways to contribute." Webb thought about the incredible transformation he had witnessed. 6 months ago, these people had been living peaceful lives on distant colonies. Today, they were the most powerful military force in galactic history. "Do you think we did the right thing?" he asked. Santos showed him another report. This one was from the New Geneva Reconstruction Project. Coalition work crews were already breaking ground for new cities. Schools were being built. Farms were being planted. Children from other human colonies were volunteering to help design the new playgrounds. "Ask me in 10 years, she said, when the New Geneva is full of children who can grow up without worrying about orbital bombardments." Years later, historians would call it the Great Transformation, the moment when the galaxy's balance of power shifted from the old empires to the young species that had learned to defend itself. They would study the Battle of Kethvar as an example of how overwhelming force could be used to create peace rather than destruction. But for the children playing in the rebuilt parks of New Geneva 2, it was simpler than that. The scary aliens who hurt people were gone. The nice humans with the big ships made sure nobody could hurt children anymore. That was all they needed to know. Above them, the stars were safe. In space stations throughout the galaxy, human crews maintained the peace. Former coalition ships served alongside human dreadnoughts, their crews learning that protecting civilians was more honorable than conquering them. The galaxy's most feared military force spent its time building schools and stopping conflicts before they started. Sometimes when young coalition officers asked their human commanders why they had chosen mercy over revenge, the humans would show them a picture, a child's drawing of stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. At the bottom in crayon the words, "My family," and a name, Tommy Wilson, age 6. "This is why," they would say, "so that every child in the galaxy can draw pictures like this without fear." The coalition had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about expanding too quickly. They had succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. Humanity had learned the lesson perfectly. They had learned that some things are worth fighting for. They had learned that overwhelming force can protect the innocent. They had learned that the best way to prevent genocide is to make sure those who commit it face consequences too terrible to imagine. Most importantly, they had learned that a species willing to build 500,000 dreadnoughts to protect their children will never stop protecting all children everywhere. The galaxy was a better place because someone had tried to teach humanity their place in it. Unfortunately for the coalition, humanity's place turned out to be at the top. The stars trembled as 10,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel stretched over 2 kilometers long, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The largest ship, the flagship, Eternal Dominion, dwarfed even these giants. From its command bridge, Admiral Vexithara gazed at the primitive star system spread before her fleet. "Target confirmed, Admiral," reported her tactical officer, his scaled hands dancing across holographic displays. "Third planet from the star. The inhabitants call it Earth." Vexithara's 4 eyes studied the blue-green world on the main screen. Such a small, insignificant planet to require such a massive force. But the Hegemony High Command had been clear in their orders. This species, these humans, showed disturbing signs of rapid technological advancement. Better to crush them now before they became a problem. The Admiral's species, the Kethmori, had served as the Hegemony's military arm for over 3,000 years. They had conquered worlds beyond counting, bringing the light of civilization to backward species across the galaxy. Most surrendered without firing a shot once they saw the size of the invasion fleet. The smart ones did anyway. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" Vexithara asked, settling her massive frame into the command chair. "Primitive nuclear weapons, Admiral. Chemical rockets barely capable of reaching their moon. They have some orbital stations and a few exploration vessels, but nothing that could threaten even our smallest frigate." The tactical officer paused, consulting his datapad. "Intelligence estimates their entire military could be neutralized within the first hour of engagement." Vexithara nodded. It was always the same story. These young species thought they were the masters of their tiny corner of space until the hegemony arrived to show them the truth. The galaxy belonged to the strong, and humanity was about to learn just how weak they really were. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the planet, multiple languages, but our translators are adapting quickly." "Put it through," Vexithara ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a chaos of human voices. Fear, confusion, desperate attempts to understand what was happening. Some voices tried to establish contact, others shouted orders in what sounded like military frequencies. Through it all, Vexithara heard something that made her mandibles click. In amusement, defiance. These little creatures actually thought they could resist. How entertaining. "Shall I prepare the standard surrender broadcast, Admiral?" asked the communications officer. "Yes, but take your time. Let them look at our fleet for a while first. Fear makes them more reasonable." On Earth, the reaction was everything Vexithara expected and more. Their primitive detection systems had finally noticed the massive fleet sitting at the edge of their solar system. Radio chatter increased dramatically as their leaders tried to comprehend what they were facing. President Sarah Chen stood in the emergency command center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, staring at the tactical display that showed 10,000 red dots arranged in perfect formation. Each dot represented a warship larger than anything humanity had ever built. "How long do we have?" she asked General Morrison, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "They're holding position at the edge of the system. Could be here in days, maybe hours if they decide to accelerate." Morrison was a career military man who had seen combat on 3 continents, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Options? Honestly, ma'am, we don't have any good ones. Our best military satellites are confirming the size of those ships. Each one could probably destroy every major city on Earth." Around the world, similar conversations were taking place in bunkers and command centers. In Moscow, Beijing, London, and every capital city, leaders grappled with the impossible reality that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their new neighbors had come calling with the largest military force in human history. Dr. Emily Rodriguez, head of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence program, had dreamed of this moment her entire career. First contact with an alien civilization, but not like this. Never like this. The ship configurations suggest a hierarchical military structure, she explained to the Emergency United Nations Assembly via secure video link. The largest vessel is clearly a command ship. The formation patterns indicate a sophisticated understanding of space warfare. Can we communicate with them? Asked the Secretary General. We've been trying. Multiple frequencies, mathematical, progressions, even basic pictographs. They're definitely receiving our transmissions, but so far no response. High above Earth's atmosphere, Commander Jake Sullivan watched the alien fleet through the observation port of Orbital Station Alpha. His small crew of 12 had been preparing for a routine supply mission when the aliens arrived. Now they were humanity's front line, whether they wanted to be or not. Any word from Houston? Asked his pilot, Lieutenant Maria Santos. They're still trying to figure out what to do. Can't say I blame them. Sullivan had been in space for 8 years, longer than any active astronaut. He'd seen Earth from orbit thousands of times, but never had it looked so fragile, so vulnerable. The alien ships hung in space like dark omens, their very presence changing everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. Sullivan wondered if his daughter back in Texas could see them with a telescope. Probably not yet, but soon the whole world would know that the universe was a much more crowded place than anyone had imagined. Back on the flagship, Vexthera decided enough time had passed. The humans had seen their fleet, understood their hopeless position. Now came the offer of mercy. "Open a channel to the planet," she commanded. "All frequencies." The communications officer nodded, and Vexthera stood to deliver the message she had given to dozens of worlds before. "People of Earth," her voice boomed across every radio, television, and communications device on the planet, automatically, translated into every human language. "I am Admiral Vexthera of the Hegemony Fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into our glorious empire. On Earth, billions of people stopped what they were doing to listen to the impossible. Voice from space. You have one planetary rotation to consider our generous offer. Surrender unconditionally, and your species will be preserved as productive members of hegemony society. Your leaders will be educated in proper governance. Your resources will contribute to the greater good of the galaxy." President Chen closed her eyes as the alien's words washed over her. Around the emergency command center, advisors and generals waited for her response. "Resist," Vexthera continued, "and we will demonstrate why 1,000 civilizations have chosen wisdom over destruction. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels. Your orbital installations exist only by our mercy. Choose carefully." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. Vexthera settled back into her command chair, satisfied. Within hours, the human leaders would contact her to discuss terms of surrender. They always did. The alternative was simply too terrible to contemplate. But deep in her command bunker, President Chen was already issuing orders that would have surprised the alien admiral. Orders to activate defense systems that officially didn't exist. Orders to deploy weapons that had been built in secret over the past 20 years. Ever since scientists first detected unusual signals from deep space. Humanity had been preparing for this day longer than the hegemony realized. The stage was set for a battle that would reshape both species' understanding of war, courage, and the true meaning of victory. In 18 hours, Admiral Vexthera would learn that some species fight harder when cornered, and that the most dangerous enemy is one with nothing left to lose. 24 hours after the ultimatum, Admiral Vexthera still waited for humanity's surrender. She had expected their leaders to contact her within hours, begging for mercy and offering terms. Instead, she received only silence from the small. "Blue Planet! Admiral?" her communications officer reported. "We're detecting increased activity on the planet's surface. Multiple launch signatures." "Primitive rockets," Vexthera dismissed with a wave of her clawed hand. "Probably evacuation attempts. Scan for any transmission indicating surrender." but the tactical officer's next words wiped the amusement from her features. "Admiral, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting weapon signatures. The humans appear to be targeting our fleet." Vexathara's 4 eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Their weapons couldn't reach us at this distance." The main display shifted to show dozens of objects accelerating toward the hegemony fleet. They moved faster than any human technology should allow, following intercept courses that suggested sophisticated targeting systems. "Time to impact?" she demanded. 17 minutes for the first wave, Admiral. 43 minutes for the second." Vexathara studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The objects were too small to be ships, too fast to be chemical. Rockets. What were these humans thinking? Signal the third battle group. Move them forward to intercept these toys. Show the humans what real weapons can do. A formation of 50 hegemony destroyers broke from the main fleet, their fusion drives burning bright as they accelerated toward the incoming objects. Each destroyer carried enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Destroying a few primitive missiles would be trivial. But as the destroyers moved into interception range, something unexpected happened. The human missiles didn't try to evade. Instead, they accelerated toward the hegemony ships with suicidal intensity. Point defense systems. Engaged, filling space with energy beams and projectiles. Most of the human weapons were destroyed before they could reach their targets. Most, but not all. The lead destroyer, the Swift Retribution, managed to intercept 3 missiles before a 4th slipped through its defenses. Vexathara expected to see a small explosion, maybe some minor damage to the destroyer's shields. Instead, a miniature sun bloomed in space. The nuclear warhead, primitive by galactic standards but devastating at close range, overwhelmed the destroyer's shields and tore through its hull. The ship's reactor containment failed, adding its own explosive death to the human weapon's fury. In seconds, one of the hegemony's finest warships became an expanding cloud of superheated gas. "What was that?" Vexathara whispered, staring at the empty space where her destroyer had been. Before anyone could answer, more explosions lit up the void. The humans had packed their missiles with nuclear warheads, turning each one into a ship killer. The hegemony's advanced shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, offered little protection against weapons that turned matter itself into energy. 6 more destroyers died in the first exchange. "Admiral," the tactical officer's voice cracked with disbelief, "we've lost 7 ships. The humans are using atomic weapons." Vexathara felt something she hadn't experienced in decades of warfare: surprise. These primitive creatures were actually fighting back. Not only fighting, but drawing blood. "Recall the third battle group," she ordered. "Reform defensive positions." But the humans weren't finished. From behind Earth's moon, where hegemony sensors couldn't detect them, a new threat emerged. Ships began decloaking, dozens of them, sleek and angular compared to the organic curves of hegemony vessels. They had been hiding, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Commander Jiang Wei aboard the stealth frigate Beijing's Fury watched as his orders came through on the encrypted channel. 20 years of secret construction, 20 years of preparing for this day. Earth's governments had learned to cooperate when faced with the possibility of alien invasion. The ships they built were crude compared to what was bearing down on them, but they carried humanity's best weapons and most determined crews. "All ships, this is Beijing's Fury," Jiang transmitted on the secured frequency. "Execute Operation Broken Arrow for Earth." The human fleet accelerated toward the alien formation, their nuclear engines pushing them to speeds that made their crews' bones ache. They weren't trying to match the aliens' technology. They were trying to get close enough to use humanity's oldest military tactic: get in close and hit hard. Vexathara watched in fascination as the human ships approached. They were clearly outmatched, clearly outgunned. Any rational species would have turned back. Instead, they kept coming. "Target the lead vessels," she commanded. "Show them the futility of resistance." Hegemony beam weapons reached out across space, striking the human ships with devastating accuracy. Hulls buckled and atmosphere vented, but the surviving ships didn't slow down. If anything, they accelerated. The Beijing's Fury took a direct hit that tore away half her port side, but Commander Zhang kept his ship on course. His crew worked frantically to maintain engine power and weapon systems, their faces grim with determination. "Sir, we've lost life support on decks 3 through 7, his first officer reported. "Seal the compartments and keep firing," Zhang replied. "We only need to last long enough to get close." The human strategy became clear as the first ships reached the hegemony formation. They weren't trying to win a traditional space battle. They were turning themselves into guided missiles, ramming their nuclear-powered ships directly into the alien vessels, the destroyer. Endless victory never saw it coming. The human ship Solar Wind, her hull breached and atmosphere bleeding into space, slammed into the destroyer's command section at a significant fraction of light speed. Both ships vanished in a blast that briefly outshone Earth's sun. More human. Ships followed, their crews accepting certain death to take alien vessels with them. Some carried experimental weapons cobbled together from civilian technology. Others simply relied on the devastating power of their own destruction. Captain Sarah Kim aboard the fusion transport Prometheus made her final entry in the ship's log, as she guided her vessel toward a hegemony cruiser. "This is Captain Kim. We're about to attempt ramming speed against alien vessel designated Tango 7. If anyone finds this log, tell my family I'm proud to die for Earth. Tell them we didn't. Go quietly." The Prometheus struck the cruiser amidships, her fusion reactor breaching on impact. The explosion tore the alien ship in half and sent debris scattering across 1,000 kilometers of space. On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Vex Thara struggled to comprehend what she was witnessing. In 30 years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. These humans were fighting with a ferocity that defied all tactical logic. They sacrificed their ships and lives without hesitation, each death buying time and inflicting damage on the hegemony fleet. "Casualty report," she demanded. 23 ships destroyed, Admiral. 41 damaged, 12 critically. The tactical officer's voice shook. "The humans have lost approximately 60% of their fleet, but they're still attacking. Still attacking." After losing most of their ships, after seeing their comrades die, the remaining humans kept fighting. Vexathera had conquered species that surrendered after losing a single vessel. These creatures seemed to grow more dangerous as their losses mounted. A new alarm sounded across the bridge. The sensor operator looked up with wide eyes. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Hundreds of them. On Earth, missile silos hidden across every continent opened simultaneously. The weapons they contained had been built in absolute secrecy, funded by a coalition of nations that had put aside their differences when faced with the possibility of extinction. President Chen stood in the command center, her hand hovering over the final authorization. "Key, Madam President," General Morrison said quietly. "Once we fire these, there's no going back. They'll know we've been preparing for war." Chen looked at the tactical display showing the burning remains of humanity's first space fleet. Good people had died up there, died buying time for this moment. "General, I think they already know." She turned the key. Across Earth, 1,000 missile silos erupted. The weapons they launched were humanity's answer to superior alien technology. If you can't match their sophistication, overwhelm them with raw firepower. Each missile carried multiple nuclear warheads, and each warhead was designed with one purpose in mind: to kill alien ships. Admiral Vex Thara watched the cloud of missiles rising from Earth's surface and felt something she had never experienced. In battle before, fear. These weren't just primitive weapons. The targeting solutions were too precise, the launch coordination too perfect. These humans had been planning this battle for years, maybe decades. They had let the hegemony believe they were helpless while secretly preparing for war. All ships, evasive maneuvers, she commanded. Deploy countermeasures. But there were too many missiles, coming from too many directions. The hegemony fleet, designed for elegant battles between civilized species, found themselves in a brawl with an enemy that had no concept of civilized warfare. The missiles reached, the fleet in waves, each one a message written in nuclear fire. Earth would not go quietly into the dark. The battle had been raging for 3 days, and Admiral Vexathera no longer recognized the space around Earth. Where once her perfect formation of 10,000 ships had hung in orderly ranks, now scattered groups of damaged vessels fought desperately against an enemy that refused to die. The humans kept coming. Wave after wave of missiles rose from Earth's surface. When those ran out, they launched everything else they could find: converted cargo ships packed with explosives, orbital construction, equipment turned into kinetic weapons. Even old space stations abandoned and forgotten suddenly came alive with skeleton crews steering them toward hegemony targets. Status report, Vexathera demanded, her usual composure cracking under the strain of the longest battle of her career. 4,237 ships remaining operational, Admiral, her tactical officer reported. Another 800 require major repairs before they can return to combat effectiveness. 4,000 ships lost. In 3 days of fighting against a species that barely qualified as spacefaring. The hegemony had conquered entire star systems with fewer casualties. What about the humans? Difficult to determine, Admiral. They keep launching from new positions. Our estimates suggest they've expended 70% of their initial arsenal, but they continue to produce new weapons at an alarming rate. Vexathera studied the tactical display, trying to understand the madness she was witnessing. Every military doctrine she had ever learned said the humans should have surrendered by now. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing certain defeat, yet they fought on with a determination that bordered on insanity. A communications alert drew her attention. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It appears to be from their military leadership. Put it through. The image that appeared on the main screen showed a human female in military uniform. Her face was streaked with dirt and fatigue, but her eyes burned with uncompromising resolve. I am General Patricia Morrison, acting military commander of Earth. Defense Forces, the human said. I have a message for the alien commander. Vexathera activated the response channel. I am Admiral Vexathera. Speak. You came here expecting easy prey, Admiral. You thought we would kneel before your superior, technology, and beg for mercy. Morrison's voice carried across space with cold determination. You were wrong. Your resistance is pointless, General. You have cost us ships, yes, but you cannot win. Surrender now, and I will allow your species to survive. Morrison smiled, and the expression sent an unexpected chill through Vexathera. Admiral, you still don't understand. We're not trying to win. We're trying to make you bleed. Every ship you lose weakens your empire. Every day this battle continues. Other species in your territory hear about it. How long before they start to think that maybe the mighty hegemony isn't so mighty after all? The transmission ended, leaving Vexathera staring at an empty screen. The human was right, of course. Word of this battle would spread. Subject species would begin to question hegemony's strength. But what choice did she have? The High Command had ordered Earth's conquest, and failure was not an option. Admiral, the sensor operator called out, detecting new movement from the planet. Multiple large objects breaking orbit. The main display shifted to show massive shapes rising from Earth's surface. They were crude, ugly things compared to hegemony. Vessels clearly constructed from civilian infrastructure. Massive cargo haulers, ocean-going ships somehow fitted with rocket engines, even what appeared to be sections of orbital elevators. What are they doing? Vexathera whispered. Her question was answered as the first of the converted ships reached weapons range. Its cargo bay doors opened, revealing not weapons but people. Thousands of humans in spacesuits, each one carrying some kind of personal propulsion device. By the ancestors, the tactical officer breathed. They're using their civilians as weapons. The humans weren't civilians in the traditional sense. They were volunteers, engineers, and construction workers, and retired military personnel, all united in their determination to protect their world. Each one carried a backpack nuclear device, a crude but effective bomb designed to breach ship hulls. Commander Elena Vasquez led the first wave of what Earth's military had designated boarding torpedoes. Her construction crew had been building orbital habitats just a week ago. Now they were humanity's latest weapon in an impossible war. "Remember, people," she said over the tactical network, "we don't need to take their ships. We just need to break them. Get to their reactor rooms, their command centers, their life support systems. Make them hurt." The human swarms descended on the hegemony fleet like angry bees, too small and numerous for ship weapons to target effectively. They landed on hulls, cut through armor with industrial tools, and disappeared into the alien vessels. Aboard the heavy cruiser, Glorious Purpose, Commander Ketval felt his ship shudder under multiple impacts. "Security teams to all hull breaches," he ordered. "Repel boarders." But the humans weren't trying to capture his ship. They were trying to destroy it from the inside. Explosions echoed through the corridors as human saboteurs detonated their charges in critical systems. The ship's power grid failed, then its artificial gravity, then its life support. "Abandon ship," Ketval finally ordered, but it was too late. The humans had reached the reactor room. The Glorious Purpose vanished in a ball of fusion fire, taking its human attackers with it. This scene repeated across the fleet as humans sacrificed themselves to cripple hegemony vessels. They fought with tools never designed for combat, using welding torches as weapons and construction explosives as bombs. Many died without accomplishing their mission, but enough succeeded to turn the tide of individual battles. Captain Maria Santos had been a civilian transport pilot before the war. Now she guided her converted freighter through the wreckage of dozens of ships, hunting for targets of opportunity. Her cargo hold was packed with volunteers carrying mining charges, each one willing to die to damage the enemy. "There!" Her navigator pointed at a damaged hegemony destroyer limping away from the battle. "Her shields are down and she's venting. Atmosphere." "Perfect." Maria smiled grimly. "Time to deliver the mail." Her ship slammed into the destroyer's hull with enough force to breach both vessels. In the seconds before the hull section sealed, 50 humans poured through the gap, spreading through the alien ship like a virus. Within minutes, secondary explosions began tearing the destroyer apart from within. Watching from the flagship, Admiral Vexathara finally understood what she was truly fighting. These weren't just soldiers defending their territory. These were ordinary citizens who had decided that death was preferable to slavery. Every human seemed willing to sacrifice everything to protect their world. Admiral, her chief medical officer, requested a private channel. "I've been analyzing the human tactics and physiology. I believe I know why they fight this way." "Explain." "Their brain chemistry is different from ours, Admiral. When threatened, they release chemical compounds that enhance aggression and reduce fear responses. But more importantly, their social structure bonds them to their offspring and communities in ways we don't fully understand. They're not just fighting for themselves. They're fighting for every human who will ever live." Vexathara considered this. The hegemony conquered through superior technology and overwhelming force. Individual species joined the empire because resistance was futile and life under hegemony rule was preferable to extinction. But humans seemed to view slavery as worse than death. They would rather destroy themselves than submit. "Status of the planetary bombardment preparations?" she asked. "Ready on your command, Admiral. We can begin systematic destruction of their population centers within the hour." Vexathara hesitated. Orbital bombardment was a last resort, used only when a species proved completely intractable. It would eliminate human resistance, but it would also eliminate most of the planet's value. The High Command wanted productive worlds, not radioactive wastelands. But continuing this battle was bleeding the fleet white. Every hour brought new human attacks, new casualties, new proof that these creatures would never accept defeat. "Begin bombardment of military targets only," she finally ordered. "Precision strikes to eliminate their manufacturing capability." The order was a compromise that satisfied no one. Limited bombardment wouldn't break human resistance, but it might reduce their ability to produce new weapons. It was a decision born of frustration and growing desperation. As hegemony orbital weapons began raining fire on Earth's surface, humanity prepared its next surprise. Deep beneath the planet's crust, where alien sensors couldn't penetrate, massive tunnels stretched between continents. Hidden factories continued producing weapons, while entire cities evacuated to underground shelters that had been decades in the making. The humans had been preparing for this war far longer than anyone realized. Every contingency had been planned for, every sacrifice calculated and accepted. Dr. Emily Rodriguez stood in the underground command center beneath Colorado's Rocky Mountains, watching displays that showed the alien bombardment beginning. Cities burned, but the strategic targets were mostly empty. Humanity had learned to hide its important assets deep underground, protected by miles of rock and metal. "Phase 3 is authorized," she announced to the assembled military. Admiral Vexithera stood before the holographic communication array, her 4 hands trembling as she prepared to make the most difficult report of her military career. The image of High Admiral Zethkara materialized before her, his ancient features, carved from living stone, eyes that had witnessed the conquest of 100 worlds. "Report, Admiral Vexithara," the High Admiral commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "High Admiral, the situation on Earth has become complex." Vexithara struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like the ravings of a broken mind. "We have lost 6,400 ships. The humans continue to resist with tactics we have never encountered." Silence stretched across the communication link. Finally, Zethkara spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. "You have lost more than half your fleet to a pre-spaceflight species? High Admiral, these humans are unlike any opponent we have faced. They fight as if death means nothing to them. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation, turn civilian infrastructure into weapons, and seem to grow more dangerous the more. We hurt them. Admiral, you will complete your mission or face court-martial for incompetence. The resources committed to this operation must not be wasted." The communication ended, leaving Vexithara alone with her failing command and the impossible task of defeating an enemy that seemed to thrive on destruction. Below, on Earth's scarred surface, Dr. Emily Rodriguez worked frantically in the underground laboratory that had become humanity's last hope. Around her, scientists and engineers from every nation labored to create weapons from theories that existed only in academic papers. "The quantum resonance field is stabilizing," called out Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the particle accelerator controls. "If our calculations are correct, this should disrupt their shield harmonics." Emily nodded, reviewing the data streams flowing across her displays. The weapon they were building violated several laws of physics, but humanity had learned to break rules when survival was at stake. The alien shields worked by redirecting energy along predictable patterns. The quantum disruptor would make those patterns impossible to maintain. "How long until we can deploy?" asked General Morrison, who had been coordinating the underground resistance since the orbital bombardment began. 12 hours, maybe less," Emily replied, "but we'll only get one shot. The energy requirements will drain our entire continental power grid." "Then we better make it count." Above ground, the battle continued with desperate intensity. Human resistance. Fighters emerged from tunnel networks to attack alien ground forces, using hit-and-run tactics that turned every city block into a potential battlefield. The hegemony troops, trained for conventional warfare between organized armies, found themselves fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere. Sergeant Ket Val of the 42nd Hegemony Marine Division crouched behind the rubble of what had once been a human library, his squad's energy weapons scanning for targets. They had been fighting in this city for 6 days, and the humans still hadn't been eliminated. "Movement 2 o'clock," whispered Corporal Dexthon. Ketval aimed his rifle at the indicated position, but saw only empty streets filled with debris. Then the debris moved. Humans emerged from underground passages, from ruined buildings, from sewage systems and subway tunnels. They carried weapons cobbled together from construction tools and household chemicals, but they moved with the coordination of veteran soldiers. The first human to reach the hegemony position was a teenage girl carrying what appeared to be a modified fire extinguisher. She sprayed its contents across the aliens' defensive line, and the chemical mixture ate through their armor like acid. "Fall back," Ketval ordered, but the humans were already among them, fighting with a ferocity that made no tactical sense. They accepted wounds that should have been incapacitating, continued fighting with broken bones and bleeding injuries, threw themselves at armed soldiers with nothing but improvised weapons. A human male, old enough to be someone's grandfather, detonated an explosive device strapped to his chest, rather than let the aliens escape to fight another day. 3 hegemony Marines died with him, and the rest of the squad retreated in disorder. This scene repeated across the planet as humans demonstrated a capacity for sacrifice that the hegemony couldn't comprehend. Every human seemed willing to die, to kill even one alien soldier. Every battle became a last stand, every engagement a potential suicide mission. In space, the patterns were the same. Human ships rammed alien vessels with suicidal determination. Human crews detonated their own reactors rather than allow their ships to be captured. Even when facing certain death, they kept fighting, kept inflicting casualties, kept making the hegemony pay for every meter of space. Admiral Vexathara studied the intercepted human communications, trying to understand the enemy she faced. The translation software had finally cracked their complex languages, allowing her to listen to their military coordination and civilian broadcasts. What she heard changed everything. "This is Maria Santos reporting from Sector 7, came one. Transmission. We've lost contact with the Johnson family, but their basement workshop is still producing ammunition. The children are helping load magazines while the parents work on the assembly line. Children. The humans were using their offspring in the war effort, not as soldiers but as support personnel. Every human, regardless of age or capability, contributed to the fight." Another transmission. "Memorial services for the 3rd Denver Volunteers will be held next Tuesday, assuming we're all still alive. They took 40 alien soldiers with them. When they made their last stand, their sacrifice will not be forgotten. The humans mourned their dead, but they also celebrated them. Death in battle wasn't seen as tragedy, but as achievement. They were turning martyrdom into a weapon." "Admiral," her intelligence officer approached with a data pad. "We've completed analysis of human social structures. I think you need to see this." Vexathara reviewed the report with growing understanding and horror. Human society was built around concepts the hegemony had never encountered. Family bonds that superseded individual survival. Loyalty to abstract concepts like freedom and independence. The willingness to die for ideas rather than just territory or resources. "They're not fighting for their government," she realized aloud. "They're fighting for their children's future." It explained everything: the suicidal attacks, the civilian resistance, the refusal to surrender even when facing annihilation. The humans weren't protecting a political system or economic structure. They were protecting something the hegemony had never learned to value: the right to determine their own destiny. The communication alarm sounded, and Vexathara found herself facing another human leader on the main screen. This one was different. Younger, with the bearing of someone who had seen too much death but refused to be broken by it. I am President Sarah Chen, the human said. I believe it's time we talked, Admiral. There is nothing to discuss, Vexthara replied, though her conviction was weaker than before. Surrender unconditionally, and your species will be preserved. Preserved as slaves, Chen said. That's not preservation, Admiral. That's extinction with a different name. You cannot win this war. Your losses are unsustainable. Chen smiled, and the expression was both sad and terrifying. Admiral, you're still thinking like a conqueror. You measure victory in ships destroyed and territory captured. But we're not trying to conquer anything. We're trying to survive as free beings. Your freedom is meaningless if you're all dead. Our freedom is meaningless if we're all slaves. That's the difference between us, Admiral. You fight to expand an empire. We fight to remain ourselves. The transmission continued, and Vexthara found herself drawn into the most disturbing conversation of her life. The human president spoke of concepts that had no hegemony equivalent: the right to choose one's government, the importance of individual liberty, the belief that some things were worth dying for, even if victory was impossible. Your empire has conquered 1,000 worlds, Chen said, but has it ever created anything? Has it ever made its citizens happier, or safer, or more fulfilled? Or does it just grow for the sake of growth? Vexthara had no answer. The hegemony existed to expand. That was its purpose, its reason for being. She had never questioned whether expansion served any greater goal. We could have built something together, Chen continued. Humans and your people, sharing knowledge and resources as equals. Instead, you came here to make us kneel. You turned cooperation into conquest. The strong rule the weak, Vexthara said, reciting the first principle of hegemony doctrine. It is the natural order. The natural order according to whom? Your ancestors, who decided that might makes right? Admiral, what if they were wrong? What if there's a better way to organize galactic civilization? The conversation ended with both leaders no closer to agreement, but Vexthara found her certainties shaken. For the first time in her military career, she wondered if the hegemony's way was the only way. Around her, the flagship's bridge crew worked with mechanical efficiency, but she could see the doubt in their eyes. They had heard the intercepted transmissions, seen the human willingness to die for abstract principles. Some of them were beginning to ask the same questions that plagued their admiral. 3 weeks had passed since the first shot was fired, and Earth hung in space like a wounded animal, its surface scarred by orbital bombardment, its skies dark with smoke from burning cities. But still, impossibly, the humans fought on. Admiral. Vexthara stood in her command center, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been the greatest fleet in hegemony history. Of the 10,000 ships that had arrived to conquer a primitive world, fewer than 800 remained combat effective. The rest were debris, scattered across the solar system as monuments to human stubbornness. Admiral, her tactical officer reported with exhausted resignation, the quantum disruptor has been activated. On the main display, a new energy signature bloomed from Earth's surface. The beam that reached into space was invisible to normal sensors, but its effects were immediately apparent. Across the hegemony fleet, shield generators began failing as their harmonic frequencies became impossible to maintain. All ships, emergency power to defensive systems, Vexthara commanded. But she knew it was too late. The humans had waited until the fleet was weakest, most demoralized, before unveiling their final surprise. The last wave of human ships rose from Earth like angry spirits. These weren't converted civilian vessels or hastily assembled fighters. These were purpose-built warships, sleek and deadly, constructed in underground shipyards while the battle raged above. Each one carried weapons that shouldn't have been possible for such a young species to create. Captain John Harrison commanded the lead ship, the Indomitable, humanity's first true warship. His crew consisted of volunteers from every nation on Earth, united by the knowledge that this was their last chance to drive the invaders away. All ships, this is Harrison, he transmitted to the human fleet. Remember what we're fighting for. Not for victory, we're fighting so that someday human children will grow up free. The Indomitable's main gun fired, sending a stream of accelerated particles into the hull of a hegemony cruiser. The alien ship's shields, destabilized by the quantum disruptor, offered no protection. The beam tore through armor and superstructure, like paper, gutting the vessel in seconds. More human ships joined the attack, their crews accepting that this was a one-way mission. They had fuel for this battle and nothing more. Win or lose, none of them would return to Earth. Vexithara watched her fleet die ship by ship, each loss a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The creatures she had dismissed as primitive had created weapons that challenged hegemony technology, tactics that confounded military doctrine developed over millennia of conquest. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the High Command, her communications officer announced. The holographic image of High Admiral Zeth Kara materialized, his ancient features twisted with rage. Admiral Vexithara, explain how you have managed to lose an entire battle fleet to a species that builds with metal and combustion. High Admiral, the humans are not what our intelligence indicated. They fight with a determination that... Silence. Zeth Kara's voice cut across, space like a blade. You will withdraw immediately to the outer system and await reinforcements. This embarrassment ends now. High Admiral, with respect, I believe we should consider negotiation. These humans are a cancer that must be excised before it spreads. You have your orders, Admiral. The transmission ended, leaving Vexithara with the bitter knowledge that the hegemony would never accept defeat. More fleets would come, larger ones, until Earth was nothing but radioactive ash. The humans had won this battle, but the war would continue until one species was extinct, unless someone chose a different path. All ships prepare for emergency jump to Rally Point Gamma, she ordered. Signal general retreat. The surviving hegemony vessels began charging their hyperspace drives, preparing to flee the system they had come to conquer. But Admiral Vexithara had one final message to send. Open a channel to the planet, she commanded. All frequencies. President Chen's image appeared on the screen, her face gaunt with exhaustion, but her eyes still burning with defiance. Admiral, have you come to dictate new surrender terms? I have come to warn you, Vexithara said quietly. My fleet is retreating, but others will follow. The High Command will not accept this defeat. They will send everything they have to destroy your world. Chen nodded slowly. We know. We've always known this was just the beginning. Then why fight? Why condemn your species to extinction for a few more years of freedom? Chen's smile was sad, but unbroken. Because those few years matter, Admiral. Because every human who dies free is a victory over the idea that might makes right. Because somewhere in your empire, there are other species watching this battle and learning that even gods can bleed. Vexithara felt something she had never experienced before. Shame. Shame for the empire she served, for the countless worlds she had helped subjugate, for the civilizations that had died without ever knowing they could fight back. Admiral, Chen continued, some of your people will survive this battle. When they return to your empire, they'll carry stories of what they saw here. Stories of humans who chose death over slavery. Those stories will spread, and other species will start to ask questions about why they kneel to the hegemony. The transmission ended, leaving Vexithara with a terrible understanding. The humans had never intended to win this battle in any traditional sense. They had intended to create a legend that would outlive their species. Every human death had been a seed planted in the fertile ground of galactic consciousness. As the last hegemony ships jumped to hyperspace, they left behind a system transformed. Earth burned, its population decimated, its civilization shattered. But the humans had achieved something impossible. they had made the hegemony retreat. Word of that retreat would spread to every corner of the galaxy. 6 months later, Admiral Vexithara stood in the defendant's dock at her court-martial, charged with gross incompetence and dereliction of duty. The High Command needed a scapegoat for the greatest military disaster in hegemony history, and she had been chosen to bear that shame. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" asked the presiding judge. Vexithara looked up at the assembled. Officers, beings from a dozen different species, all united in their service to the hegemony. But she could see something new in their eyes now. Doubt. Questions about the empire they served and the wars they fought. "The humans taught me something," she said finally. "They taught me that there are things worth dying for, principles worth fighting for even when victory is impossible. The hegemony conquers through fear, but the humans showed us what courage looks like." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Several junior officers exchanged glances, and Vexithara knew her words had found fertile ground. "You are hereby stripped of rank and sentenced to exile," the judge pronounced. "May the ancestors forgive your failure." As guards led her away, Vexithara caught sight of a young communications officer who had served aboard her flagship. The A officer met her eyes and nodded slightly, understanding passing between them. The seeds were already growing. Across the galaxy, in the subjugated systems that formed the backbone of the hegemony, word of Earth's resistance spread through underground networks and whispered conversations. Species that had accepted hegemony, rule for generations, began to remember what freedom meant. On the industrial world of Kethmora, workers in the munitions factories began sabotaging weapons shipments. On the agricultural planet of Vexthari, farmers started hiding food from hegemony tax collectors, small acts of defiance that grew bolder with each passing day. The rebellion began slowly, carefully, but it began, and at its heart was the story of a small blue planet whose people had chosen death over slavery, whose sacrifice had lit a fire that would burn across the stars. Earth was gone, its cities in ruins, its people scattered to the void in whatever ships they could build or steal. But the human spirit lived on in every act of defiance, every moment of resistance, every species that looked up at their alien overlords and whispered, "No." Commander Sarah Kim's daughter, one of the few survivors evacuated before the final bombardment, stood on the observation deck of the refugee ship Remembrance, looking back at the solar system that had been her home. Earth was just a distant point of light now, but she carried with her the memory of her mother's sacrifice and the promise that humans would return someday. "What do we do now?" asked another survivor, a child who had lost everything but his hope. Sarah. Kim Jr. smiled, her mother's determination burning in her young eyes. "Now we learn. We grow stronger, and we teach the galaxy what humans really are." The hegemony had won the battle for Earth, but in winning, they had lost something far more valuable, their monopoly on fear. Across the galaxy, the age of unquestioned authority was ending, and the age of rebellion was about to begin. The humans were gone, but humanity lived on in every being who chose freedom over safety, courage over submission. Earth's children had scattered to the stars, carrying with them the most dangerous weapon in the universe, the idea that even the smallest voices raised together could shake the foundations of heaven itself. 10 ships had survived to carry word of Earth's defiance back to the hegemony. They thought they were returning with news of victory. Instead, they brought the seeds of their empire's destruction, planted by a